Hello, all you skibbies. You are listening to Great Answers Kink, Sex, and Culture podcast, where we talk about adult things like communication and consent and, the physical things that our bodies do with each other and the wonderful effects they have on our brains. So if you are too young to be listening to that kind of stuff, you should stop and go and listen to something else. But if you are not too young to be listening to this kind of stuff, then I'm glad to have you here. It's fun to be here. I'm getting a lot of good feedback. The Kink, Sex, and Culture podcast is relatively new, although it's the logical descendant of the Ropecast, which went on for many, many years, 12 years of podcasting in the Ropecast. But we are getting really fun guests and really great feedback on things. So thank you for that. Keep the cards and letters coming. greatanswer@gmail.com, or on Twitter, I'm greatanswer. And you can also get in touch with me via my Patreon, patreon.com/greatanswer. That's how people help me support and grow this podcast, not just providing me with the ability to have the time to do these interviews and editing and things like that, but also things like buying the domain kinksexculture.com. And you can easily find the podcast or tell friends about it by just telling them, yeah, I heard this great podcast. Go to kinksexculture.com and you can get on board too. Coming up in a couple of weeks is, of course, Ropecraft. Now, you've heard me talk a little bit about that, and it's kind of eaten my world right now. And part of that is the podcast. I've been having people that are, coming to Ropecraft or who are teaching at Ropecraft, and this is included in that whole collection. I am interviewing BadKittyBondage. Now, BadKittyBondage, I one time thought that was one person. No, it's actually three people. It's Catherine, Diana, and Tina. And they are a dynamic trio. They'll refer to themselves as the premier all-girl rope group. Which I would have to agree. They are fantastic performers. They are fantastic teachers. And you'll hear us talk about all of that in this interview. It is a really dynamic one. We go all over the place, including diving into a little bit of that tricky subject of consent, because we are nuanced kinds of people. And I also would like to give a little shout out before we go to the interview to my friend Monk. I had a really neat moment the other night when I was hanging out with my friends Ozma and Frank, who also are working really hard on Ropecraft, and I were visiting them and out on their porch, and suddenly they bring out this little piece of rope, and it's about 4 millimeter, and it's red with these gold lights in it. And I got this lump in my throat. Now, you may think, why would you get a lump in your throat? It's because the history of that kind of rope. Twisted Monk, a long time ago, had a fire in his abbey where he makes the rope. And during that fire, it's the kind of thing that could have wiped out his entire business. But he asked the community if they wanted to help him keep going, if we would put in orders for a batch of rope that he would give us when he could rebuild. And we were basically, providing the capital for him to be able to rebuild. And he did it. And he produced a kind of rope called Phoenix, which was this beautiful shade of red along with some yellow highlights. And that Phoenix rope went really fast, as you might imagine. I only got one piece of it, and that piece I carried with me for a long time, did a lot of great things with it, but unfortunately, I had to, I didn't have to, but I used it actually as a part of a memorial service for another dear friend, which is a whole other story, but basically I didn't have that rope anymore. So I don't remember exactly. Maybe it was 10 years later, something along the lines. Monk did a sort of a refrain of that kind of rope, and he called it Brimstone. And it was also, red with these beautiful yellow little tones in it. Looked like flames in the rope. It was just really, really, really awesome. And that one went even faster than the Phoenix rope had, so I didn't get any of it. Believe it or not, even when they're your sponsor, you don't always get special consideration like that. We don't believe in nepotism except when it comes to our nephews. Anyway, so when Ozma pulled out that rope and told me that it was commemorating a lot of the rope journey that she and Frank and I had been on, because we've known each other for longer than I think I've known Monk. And you can actually go to her FetLife profile, Ozma of Oz, and see a picture of her at the rope rodeo that Monk ran at ShibariCon way back in 2007. Lots and lots of fun stuff. So that rope was tremendously layered with meaning, and the fact that she and Frank were presenting it to me in person makes it one of the most treasured pieces that I will ever have in my rope bag. Plus, with a little bit of luck, I can tie up her girlfriend, who also happens to be my serva, and do wonderful things to her with that rope. So it's a great thing, and it's a part of why I'm really glad to have Twisted Monk as the sponsor of this show, because he creates more than just pieces of rope. He creates experiences and memories and connections between people. And what more could you ask? All right, so we are getting ready to go into this podcast. Now, keep in mind, it's not too late, if you're listening to this podcast shortly after it goes out, to come to Ropecraft Chicago. Go to ropecraft.net, click on the register tickets, and then you'll see the ticket prices are like $229 right now. That's for latecomers. You can use the code GreatAnswerGuest, and you can get in at a lower price. We also have day passes. If you wanted to go in for just one day, like Saturday, and then go to IML on Sunday, and then decide to come back on Monday, that's right, you get Monday included in either the Saturday or Sunday day passes. The hotel is beautiful. You can go and book rooms there at a reduced rate, thanks to the Ropecraft crew. And also, you will get to meet wonderful people like Catherine, Diana, and Tina, who you may also know on FetLife as the wonderful trio Bad Kitty Bondage. And here they are telling us all about the joy that they take in rope. Hello, all you skebes. Thanks to the magic of computers and silicon and the internet and stuff like that. I usually say Skype, and we're not using Skype, so it throws me off a little bit. I get to talk with I got to talk with the premier all-girl rope group. and I feel comfortable saying that because they just use that to refer to themselves. This is Bad Kitty Bondage. And I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves and talk about your roles that you play within. I mean, it's like interviewing Josie and the Pussycats or something. It's like, you're whole group here. So.
All right. Well, I think Kat should start.
All right. I'm Catherine. I'm primarily, I do a lot of rope with us. I don't do very much of the bottoming, but yeah, me and Diana started. I'll let her kind of go into that.
Yeah. So Kat and I have been friends for a while now, and we met in the San Antonio kink scene back in, I think, 2012, where I was just starting to rope bottom because I was doing yoga one day and someone said, "Hey, you're bendy. Can I tie you up?"
I don't know who said that.
That was your line? She's bowing her head in shame.
That's her pickup line for, I think, everybody is, "Hey, want to get tied up?"
That's exactly what she said to me.
Yeah.
I've used it a time or two myself, so I can't argue with that.
So I ended up doing it just, sure, I'll be helpful, and then ended up falling in love with it. I think we really started tying together frequently when we went to, I think it was the Art of Contemporary Shibari exhibit in Houston, where we ended up getting the chance to tie in the art gallery. So she hung me in the art gallery there in Houston. That was pretty amazing. And then
we got to borrow a bunch of people. Like I think Lou Rubens loaned us his rope and hardware, and Noble was there, and we had to get stuff from a whole bunch of different people to do this because we didn't bring any equipment with it. We didn't expect to be tying at this exhibit. We expect to be going to it. And Jake Kimbaku actually is the guy who kind of was like, "Hey, you guys, you should tie," and then he convinced everybody there to kind of let us do it. So that was really cool.
Yeah, so that was really fun. So that was our first real tying out and about, and then not too long after, We had somebody who was organizing a goth night at a local bar in San Antonio, who wanted a bondage performance playing in the background, so to speak, at their bar to sort of supplement their goth night. And they also had some burlesque dancers there too. So we ended up doing these bondage performances there once a week during their goth night, which was a lot of fun. Made no money and instead had people try to tip me like a stripper. But you know, we got a lot of experience tying together doing that. And in the process, I learned to do quite a bit of self-suspension. And through that, I ended up progressing to learning to tie and becoming a rigger as well, as opposed to just a rope bottom. So
that's actually where we got our name too.
Yeah. So our name came from the fact that when we were doing these performances, someone asked, "Oh, what's the name of your group? What's the name of your performance?" Really, I don't know. And
I was her submissive kitten at the time.
Yeah. So since she was my submissive kitty cat, and I always told her she was a very bad kitty. She liked to tie people up, so we were just like, "Hey, BadKittyBondage, let's do it."
So you were a submissive who was topping.
Yes.
I was a submissive who was topping my dom.
Nice.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Which was a strange dynamic. Our friendship started with us exchanging me doing impact play on her for her tying me up. Because my start as a top was mainly doing impact. And more leathery things.
Fast forward a few years of teaching at different local events in Texas and up here in Chicago and doing some cons here and there. We met Tina here. And
there's not a whole lot of story. Like, she literally did just kind of ask me at a party once, like, "Hey, you want to get tied up?" And I was like, "Sure." Okay. And I don't just say that to everybody who says that to me. I knew more or less who she was, and she seemed pretty cool. So we started tying from there. And then I guess, what was it, like maybe a year or so later, I became more of a more official member of BadKittyBondage. And now here we are.
What point did you start teaching?
So, I mean, I was teaching by myself when we were in San Antonio. I came out. I've been doing rope since I was like 12 or 11, doing a lot of self bondage, and then it was part of all of my private relationships throughout my marriage and stuff with my ex-wife. But then I came out publicly in the scene to my first dungeon event, probably in 2012, and I quickly started teaching, like, because I love doing rope, and I had an audience, like people wanted to learn what I had to do. They saw that I could actually, I could tie and stuff. So I started doing it. And then me and Diana started tying a lot when we did, and we started teaching together. And I think the first event we did was at Sarge, was in San Antonio. And we did a few of those.
And then I think the first con we did was Bondage Expo Dallas. Was that our first one? Yeah.
So that was the second year that they were doing that was our first like really big opportunity to teach, I think.
So you have a couple of different demographics in there. Oh man, I'm really echoing here. Hang on a second. I see. Okay. Now it's not echoing. It is a little bit. Okay. I'm sorry about this. I'm going to have to just make this an edit later on. 16, 27. So you have a few different demographic sort of unique niches there. You have the submissive being the top and the dominant being the bottom. Tina, where do you fall on that spectrum?
I don't. Okay.
And then you have a toy, I guess.
That's about it, right? Like, I don't consider myself particularly submissive. I mean, I can occasionally get into that sort of space for play, but it's not my main gig. I just like bottoming.
Yeah.
So,
and we have since decided to stop with our, DS dynamic because we realized we worked better as friends, and Kat and I are now best friends. And I think it was putting a bit of a strain on our friendship, so we decided that sort of an equal relationship was best.
Right.
Yeah, so now I'll still beat her up and she'll still tie me. But
Yeah, we wanted to maintain our friendship, and we wanted to keep doing Bad Kitty Bondage because we both love teaching. We both love photography and taking pictures. We're both artists. We draw. We do all sorts of stuff. And we wanted to maintain that over, our DS relationship. It just wasn't worth the emotional baggage that came along with that to try to maintain everything. Mm-hmm. So.
I think that's neat how a relationship can change instead of ending. It can transform.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
absolutely.
So, what has it been like being the, as you put it, all-girl rope group?
It's interesting. The biggest thing for me is the change from being like a guy who used to do rope, and then I transitioned because I'm trans to a woman who does rope now, and it's a very different kind of different world. Being out there and being somebody who's primarily like gravitates towards women, not just romantically, but just people that I like to tie with and everything else. It's kind of been an interesting switch. So.
Yeah. And Diana's also gone from being the rope bottom exclusively to topping quite a bit as well.
Yeah, and that's been an interesting change because I think because the photographs are, when we first started, the photographs were almost exclusively of me getting tied by Kat. And I think there was the perception when I moved to Chicago, specifically, not really in San Antonio, but when we moved to Chicago, I think everyone just assumed I was only a bottom and then B, Cat submissive. So people kept asking her for permission to talk to me, which was really hilarious. And you could see the rage boiling in my face.
I remember the first time somebody said that to me, came up to me and was like, "Hey, I really want to play with Diana. Do you mind?" And I'm like, "Man, you have this completely backwards." You don't know how backwards this is.
I was going to ask if you had any constructive suggestions for dealing with those kinds of assumptions in the dungeon, that don't involve punching or things like that.
So in our local scene, it's not so, a lot of people know that we both do rope and stuff. It's kind of interesting, like on FetLife, when we'll go through our messages and stuff, and every once in a while we'll get that message from the guy who's just like, "Hey, you guys are beautiful. I would love to make you my submissive." And we get pigeonholed into where even though we're two of us are primarily tops that do rigging with other bottoms for photography or whatever, people still assume and I think that's a bigger thing in the BDSM world to begin with, right? Is women tend to get seen as being submissive or bottomy, regardless of whether they are or not, or what their outward persona is like. And it's been interesting because that doesn't go away. I mean, there's nothing. At least since I've moved to Chicago, there is nothing really about me that is submissive. Like, I will be to certain people, but generally in very select, like not outwardly in public.
Yeah, and I think being a switch too as a woman, I think you experience that more because I feel like if you're ever seen bottoming, then it's usually the tops who just come and chase after you and want to play with you. That's not always the case, but it's certainly an experience, or the toppy tops don't respect you as much as they might another person who's exclusively a top.
You almost become seen as a bottom who tops.
Yes, absolutely.
Even though you may identify as a top who sometimes bottoms.
Yeah.
Right. I know of one group of tops. Well, if you wanted to be a top within the group, they had both in the group. But if you had a top, you were never allowed to bottom in public. If you did that, you were out of the group. And
wow.
Yeah, that's a little bizarre.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you agree to. I mean, but yeah, it's interesting how that happens in our communications with people and just our interactions.
Do you ever go into a dungeon that you maybe new at or new at a new event or something and sort of feel like you have to do a scene to establish your bona fides?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I actually, when we moved to Chicago, because everyone was treating me like a bottom, I actually just actively asked a few people that we knew. I'm like, hey, I'm not looking for a relationship, but will one of you bottom for me so I can just fucking establish my, identity here as a top and just saying, hey, this is purely what this is. And sure enough, I had, a few mascots saying, oh yeah, me, you can beat me up. So I'm like, okay, but it wasn't until that point that people actually realized that I topped, and
I mean, I to say that interestingly, like the same thing happens kind of at cons for me. Like I describe myself as an introverted extrovert. Like I'm really shy unless you get me talking. But when I'm at a con or something, it's kind of weird because I'm a girl who does like primarily topping, and a lot of people are there to get tied up, and I know that, but it's just like I feel like I have to do that. I have to go have a scene. So I'll usually find somebody I know, and I'll do a scene with them. And then, sometimes people come up to me afterwards because I have a really hard time going up to people and saying, hey, I would like to tie with you, because I just don't know how to navigate that.
You say, hey, I want to get tied up.
I say, hey, we want to get tied up. I don't.
But it sounds stupid at a rope con.
It sounds stupid at a rope con.
At Ropecraft, you have the little wristbands, so you can at least have a head start of being able to tell.
Yeah, but now you took away her one pickup line.
Now you just have to change the intonation, like, hey, you want to get tied up.
or you could just add on 2 extra letters. I see you want to get tied up. Do you want to get tied up by me?
Yeah. For me, it's that. It's, hey, I see you want to get tied up, but do you want to get tied up by a woman at a con?
And Tina, do you get, you said you don't normally go into the submissive space, but I know within BDSM and rope, not so much rope, I think, but certainly within the general kink scene, if you are bottoming, there is a presumption that you are usually in a submissive thing. Do you get stereotyped in that way as well?
Oh, yeah.
So,
although funnily, sometimes people assume I'm a top because I don't know, I wear a lot of black or something.
She has a very toppy aesthetic, I guess. And yeah.
She's good with the fuck off face, which I think sometimes people view as toppy.
She has resting dom face.
Yeah, resting dom face.
I don't think I do. That's my I'm on public transportation, leave me alone face.
That's kind of sums it up.
It's a trained thing to get people to leave.
She has the I am on public transportation, leave me alone face.
That's a useful thing when there's articles there about how to talk to a woman who has headphones on.
Yeah. Sunglasses actually help.
Yeah. When you're doing when you're one of the reasons that I first noticed you as a group was your teaching. Well, actually, I take it back. I'm sure I saw your pictures first, but I just heard about fantastic classes that were coming up. Is that a thing that you develop jointly, or does one person come up and then people team up, or does one person say, here's what we're going to do, and that's what happens, or?
I think it sort of depends on the class. So there have been several classes that Kat and I just sat down. We worked it out together, developed our outlines together, come up with our specific examples, demos, really went through it in detail. And there's some cases where Kat might be an expert in something that I don't really know much about. So I let her take the lead on that and then give my feedback as to whether I think, from a learning perspective, that class is progressing and, in a way that makes sense and is organized in a way that makes sense. And then if that's the case and she's taking the primary teaching role, then I'll chime in with my sort of opinions from the bottoming perspective. And that's something that we really wanted to emphasize in the beginning was that any class we taught, we had a section where she would explain how to do the tie as a top. And I would explain from the bottom side how this tie feels. And if you're bottom, do you need to stretch a certain area? Do you need to be prepared to be in pain? Is this particularly cozy? Do you not have to worry about this and this issue? Can it be adapted to meet your body? Various things like that. So we try to share responsibilities, but sometimes, she does have to take the lead with some things that I'm not an expert in.
Generally, what the process we go through is usually I'll come up with a harebrained idea or some witty silly name.
She comes up with a ridiculous name and then makes a
Then,
class
like, well, I'll think of something that I think
non-advanced ties for.
So that's a great example, that the not advanced bondage for novice rope humans.
Right.
Came from, we were talking after, I think it was after we went to Bond in Boston. We were talking about how just and it's a conversation we've had in the local community a little bit. How and sometimes in the rope universe, there seems to be this track or this like flow that people feel, right, for better or worse, people feel like they have to go through. You have to learn skill A to learn skill B to learn skill D to go.
You must study for 3 years before you try your first suspension and things like that.
Yeah, to do your first suspension, and then once you do your first suspension, you can have a hot, sexy scene and fuck the shit out of each other. When really, we wanted to come up with an idea to just kind of show people how to have fun with rope, and like take your nylon or your MFP rope or whatever and just go fuck each other. I mean, or beat the crap out of each other. You don't need this master's degree in kink education that took you 3 years to go through to have fun with rope. So that's how that class came about. Now, I'm silly. Diana's silly. Tina is kind of silly.
What?
So we come up with these, kind of silly names for our classes. But it just really comes from who we are. If you take any of our classes, you see that we take this stuff very seriously.
So the other class that I know of that I haven't, you'd think I'd know the schedule, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to go to it or not, but you're doing one on vintage porn bondage. Is that the way it would?
Yeah. So that's
Cat's baby.
That's my personal favorite class. Cause, I got into bondage, like I said, when I was really young, I got into bondage.
Now, are we talking like John Willie Pearls of Gwendolyn or Tamad?
So I found the internet in like 1999 or whatever. I found Lorelei's bedroom, I think was the first website I ever went to. And then I found, not too long after that, I found like Jim Withers and TideGirls.com. And I absolutely fell in love with the whole Western style bondage, the Chrissy Daniels type, Jewel Evans type, those models. Mm-hmm. And then I remember stumbling across insects, and that put me down, this spiral of like, oh my God, this is the hottest thing I've ever seen, which eventually led me to like Japanese style bondage, which I instantly fell in love with the aesthetic of it. And, you go back into the early 2000s and stuff, and you're not seeing all these pictures that you see now. You don't have these structured karagote and teppo shibari and all these different things. You had these people who were just doing these crazy things with a certain aesthetic that was very different from the Western style stuff. And I absolutely fell in love with those pictures, and I fell in love with that style and everything else. And I wanted to come up with a class that basically took these ties from these old pictures and kind of deconstructed them, and like really went back to what made these ties, these particular things, really enjoyable and sexy to me. Like, what do I love about this aesthetic? And kind of show people how to capture that, how to do that. And I think the best way to do that was to deconstruct them and to show people how to reconstruct those ties. Now, we kind of say in the class description that it's like we want the bottoms to be advanced, because some of the things are just, you're not doing a TK. A TK has been developed over years to be safer, right?
Yeah, safe-ish.
Safe-ish. So we want the bottoms to be able to speak up and say, look, this is not okay for this reason, right?
Yeah, because a lot of the ties, when you go back and look, many of them were drawn and are not actually positions or ties that would be humanly feasible to anyone who has a musculoskeletal system.
Yeah, Pearls of Gwendolyn. Love the books, but
yeah, we experimented with many of these, and I had to give the thumbs up or thumbs down. Like, no, I don't think a human can do this, or I think you would have to be a very small 90-pound, a very dainty woman to do this or dainty man to do this. And some are doable, but just very, very strenuous and require a lot of, flexibility or core strength, or just generally not having medical issues before you start the ties.
Yeah, I mean, but it ultimately comes from the same place as the not advanced class. It comes from the place of like, none of these ties are particularly difficult to tie, right there, but you have to know what is dangerous, what is not dangerous before I would say like you can just go do them and like do crazy stuff with them, right? You have to at least have that understanding. So I would like, I think that's one thing we try to give in that class is like, yes, you can do these type of things. And this is why you want to be careful doing it, but you can, it gets back to that like really sexy look that I think we lose with these structured ties that you see, because you look at every picture now and it's a TK, and it's a TK looks like a TK that looks like a TK, and every variation.
I sometimes like that with performances too. It's, I'm going to stand behind the model. I'm going to take off the model's clothes. I'm going to put the TK on. I'm going to breathe heavily on them for a while, and now I'm going to untie them.
Rigger sniff.
Right. Rigger sniff.
That I do.
Rigger sniff, yes.
It's okay to breathe.
If you ever watch either me or Diana play, I think you see instantly that our aesthetic is very like not that. Like we just like it.
Well, your performance aesthetic isn't that either.
Yeah, I think for me, and perhaps this is one reason where I sort of struggle to fit in with the shibari community, is that it's not necessarily about aesthetic for me. And I think for a lot of people, they get focused on the aesthetic of their ties. Versus me, I like the practicality of my ties, and I like how it, connects me with my partner or lets me torture my partner, or, puts them in a position that's degrading. And there's a cat in the room now, so that's
totally fitting. The cat in the room.
We have a very bad kitty. She is not being quiet. So
it's actually a quartet now.
Yeah,
that's okay. We'll edit that out in post. It'll be fine.
Rare. But yeah, that's the nice thing when you go back to those Japanese bondage pictures, is it's not about creating this beautiful tie per se. It's about putting somebody in these compromising, embarrassing, torturous positions. It's more about getting at that perverseness. I
one of our sponsors is the Japanese bondage, JapaneseBound.com. That's what it is. And I got one of their videos with Yukimura Haruki, and I'm thinking I'm going to see some amazing rope bondage and stuff like that. And it was good rope bondage. He tied a single line around the top of the shoulders, and the hands behind the back. And maybe that was tied up to the top. And then maybe he would tie the ankles, and that was it. And the rest of the time was torturing her, making her drool, face fucking her, all things like that. So,
it's a particular favorite of ours.
I'd say, it does. It comes down to that thing where it's not necessarily this structured aesthetic in the tie sense, but there is definitely that feel, right? Mm-hmm. That authentic feel that I think kind of gets lost in translation. And again, it goes back to that things getting put into this flow where you have to learn A, B, C, D.
Mm-hmm. Right. And your skill as a top often just gets measured by what kind of complicated things you can tie as opposed to what you're actually doing with your partner. Yeah. Because I've seen people who can do amazingly beautifully constructed ties that are absolutely perfect. I see no place where there's a teeny little line out of place, but their bottoms don't necessarily look like they're having fun.
By the time they've got their bottom in that position, I've made mine puke and we'll leave it there.
It's funny to hear you say that though, because I'm curious if any of you have like a background in education. I'm not trying to out your job or whatever, but one of the highlights of your work is that you're so good at doing things like handouts and stuff that people have occasionally imitated you quite strongly. So there's oftentimes a disagreement about, I'm not going to put my outlines online. I am going to put my outlines online. You can't use my handouts anywhere else. Go ahead and use. My handouts I have online, I say they are released under Creative Commons. You have to do an attribution, but hey, if you can teach this class better than I can, I will come to your class and I'll watch how you do it better, and then I'll do it better too. So that's how I do it. But where did that? I mean, because your handouts are awesome. I mean, that the little drawing, little postcard thing that's so clearly done. And I know that it's hard to clearly outline rope tying because I've tried. So where did that skill come from?
Well, I mean, I think
from learning.
Yeah, from learning. Again, we both have art. Me and Diane, all three of us actually, all three of us have art.
Okay, that makes
backgrounds. And I've done graphic design type stuff as well.
Okay,
so that may be like from a physical standpoint, what are you talking about?
So you cheated, is what you're saying.
And then, I do have the background in education, not a super strong background in education, but enough to, try to make things as simple as possible, because I think, if you overly complicate things, all you're doing is sort of using, sort of stroking your ego and showing how smart and how talented you are, if things aren't actually simple enough for people to understand them. So I think breaking everything down into very simple pieces, everybody enjoys that. I mean, even if it's really intuitive to you, you follow along and it's not hard.
I think, but from like a standpoint of our handouts and stuff, we put them online to share. We are all about making this community as knowledgeable as possible. I don't think I don't like the idea of people being gatekeepers to knowledge. If I know something, I'm going to share it with as many people that want to know what I have to share. If that makes it, maybe I said that weird, but I'm going to share information if I have it. I've always been that way. I'm that way with my job. I'm that way with everything.
So
the only thing
go ahead. Sorry.
The only thing I think everybody appreciates recognition for what they're doing sometimes. And I think if somebody wants to say, and we do this with our classes too, we learn stuff from other people. We're constantly learning. So when you teach something that you learn from somebody else, it's kind of cool to be like, hey, I found this from Bad Kitty Bondage, or I found this from whoever, whoever's class. This was really cool, and I want to share this. So, we kind of have the same feeling with all of our stuff, with our class material, with our handouts and everything.
So go ahead.
Oh, and so I also help co-facilitate the Rope Bottoms Roundtable, and so sometimes we'll make handouts for that and all that. And the thing is, I'm basically, a lot of the stuff I figured out myself, but most of it I've gotten from other people. So with those kind of things, I don't mind people sharing it. And I particularly want people to share this information because I do think bottoming education is still a little behind. I think that we can do a lot better job of spreading that kind of information about how to negotiate and how to do things safely. And so, that's kind of information that I really think needs to be disseminated.
So where do you fall on the idea that of whether or not presenters should be compensated for their work?
Sorry, you broke up just then.
Where do you fall in the idea that presenters should be compensated for their work?
Well, that's always the tricky question, right? I mean,
that's why I ask it.
I think I know. I mean, when you're an educator, you tend to put a lot of work and a lot of hours into developing these classes. Not everybody does, and that tends to be obvious really quick if they don't. But it does take a lot of time, and the issue is when you travel to these conferences, a lot of times you lose money, right? And most of the time you lose money. So, there was a point where I had to tell Kat, we reached a point where I said, I can't teach unless we're getting paid, or I can't teach unless we're going to break exactly even, because, at some point, you're paying to work, and I don't think that's right that you should pay to work per se. I mean, obviously you're getting stuff out of the con, but, and we're happy teaching for free and volunteering in our local communities because, we're there. you know, we're happy to give back in whatever ways we can. And we look at that as, you know, our form of community service. But when you do start doing things where that involve a lot of travel, involve a lot of prep, you know, it makes it very hard to do that when you're not getting paid and when you're losing money for it.
Right. And I've always found, I mean, as a presenter who now also produces events, I've always found that whole break even thing, you think, oh, I'll have this much for gas and then I'll break even, and you forget about meals, or I'll have this much for gas and meals and you forget about the oil change your car needs after doing that, or whatever, you forget about baggage fees or something along that lines. And it's very hard to break even for real. But at the same time, it's hard as a event to be able to pay people what it's costing them, much less what they're worth, you know?
Right.
Absolutely. The thing is there are people who do the circuit, right? Is people who present at a big chunk of the big cons, the big rope cons, right? And they do a lot of traveling. A lot of people do it professionally. That's what they do. Then you have the tier of people who don't do it. Like I have a day job, Diana has a day job, Tina has a day job. But we still do like to present. We like to travel. We like to share our information. So being compensated for the travel and stuff, to be able to do that it's awesome, because we get to do more. We get to share more stuff. If we had to front the bill for every con or every opportunity that we had to spread our information, we wouldn't be able to do it financially. I mean, I might be able to do it by myself, but that's not what we are. We're a group. We do this together. It's our deal. I mean, and we really do love sharing the information. It's great to be recognized too. I mean, like I said, it's really nice when somebody's willing to have you come across the country to share your information. That means people are listening to you, and you have something worthwhile to say, and it feels good.
Yeah. The other thing I think sets you three apart is that you you deliver as a group, as opposed to being, you know, one person coming and, you know, having a partner or partners who are there, who may not contribute as much, you know, within the classes. And I always felt as a presenter, you know, I would love to have Naya come with me to every single event. But that just wasn't always possible within our budget. And it wasn't until she started being able to teach that we felt comfortable saying, yes, we both need to come because we can offer you this much return on investment kind of thing. As opposed to being entitled to it, I guess.
Yeah, and it's been an interesting, brought an interesting set of problems doing this as a group, because actually most frequently people assume that the Bad Kitty Bondage FetLife account is just cat. So oftentimes I'll walk up to people and they're like, oh yeah, you're the one who does all the, you know, you tie with Bad Kitty Bondage all the time. I'm like, no, I'm part of Bad Kitty Bondage. I don't just know them. They're like, oh, can you hook me up with them? You know them. And I'm like, no, I am them.
I think though, just to go back to a point that you just said, though, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Is I think it's important to realize that none of us are entitled to any of this, right? We're all a bunch of people who do something kind of really silly. We tie each other up, right? And we do this at conventions.
Bondage.
It's I think that phrase though, is just feeling that like that entitlement to like, I'm this big person and you need to have me at your con. That's not where we come from. I mean, I think it's awesome that people like want to have different presenters, not just us, but different presenters out there. There are a lot of really good presenters, and to be able to share that is awesome. And you learn as much as you teach. So
yeah, oftentimes, and it is kind of nice to go to cons in certain parts of the country, which I didn't realize. I can't say I didn't realize. I forget how different cultures are when you start going across the country. And there was one con that we went to where I think we were the only group that wasn't a male top, female bottom presenter.
Shocked. This is my shocked face.
I know, it's your shocked face. Or they might have been one other female top presenter, but it was probably 90% male top presenters with female bottoms. And so that's kind of an interesting.
Always interesting, and it's great to meet the new people around. So it's a complicated, I guess, a complicated question, like a complicated topic.
Yeah. It's.
I guess the politically correct thing to say is that, we totally don't pay us. We will just travel around and just drive around and be gypsies.
That's how you burn out.
Yeah, that's how you burn out, and you start to feel like maybe you're being taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and honestly, that's one of the reasons. And Kat's known this, that several times over the past couple of years, I told her that I wanted out because of that, and not because I don't love rope bondage, not because I don't like teaching, but just because it was a losing game for me. It was having an impact on, my personal life and my career, having to take so much time off and not really getting any, pay for it. Not that I wouldn't love to do it if I have the time, but it's time you're not working if you have to leave on a Thursday to get there on a Friday, and that's something a lot of people lose sight of if you do work a 9-to-5 job.
It's the flight out there. It's like you said, it's the food. It's, the whole thing. It's the hours you put into coming up with the classes.
And the hours you lose doing other work or just relaxing and recharging. Going back to work on Monday is, well, I can't say going back to work on Monday is bad because I do now do that for a living. But back when I was trying to work the 9-to-5, that was a pain.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I think it's just that, like, you do what you love. If you can get paid for doing what you love, that's all the better. It's when you stop loving it, then you start looking at why am I doing this? Yeah. Like if I ever stopped loving bondage and stopped loving teaching bondage, I would no longer go to cons. I wouldn't do it. What's at that point? I could be getting paid all the money in the world for doing it, but what's the point? Mm-hmm. Right? To make money, and then you're the one taking advantage of.
It goes back to that authenticity thing you're talking about. It has to come from somewhere inside. Well, let's stop talking about deep stuff and get into something a little more easy to talk about. Let's talk about consent.
I'm glad we lightened the conversation up.
Actually, I'd like to throw all of you a curveball. Because this is something that is tangentially related to the conversations that have been on FetLife about, who's a consent violator and the accusations and things like that. And I haven't really had a chance to talk with other presenters and riggers face to face about this. So is it okay if I just throw a question totally out of the blue at you?
Sure.
Or an idea? Because you mentioned nuance earlier, and this is like one of those nuance kind of things. It's the frustration of the idea of the vague warning, where, somebody will say, hey, I'm going to be booking such and so. Have you heard anything about them? And the answer is, well, I've not personally had anything wrong, but you might want to ask around, which is a very vague kind of a conversation to have. And I started questioning, why do we do that? And I think the answer to why we are so vague about that is the idea of we don't want to be shit stirring. We don't want to be gossiping. We don't want to be perceived to be trying to tear down a rival. And I'm making little air quotes there for those of you listening at home. It's weird to me because I think that it's like we're afraid we're going to be shunned if we talk about things. And to some extent, I think that's why we need to talk about things, because that proves that the fear of shunning actually works to change behavior. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to figure out where's the line, and if there's a way that, among all the ideas to try and improve consent culture in the scene, if there's a way, if we need to get over our fear of talking about things and how that might work. Anyway, any thoughts?
My instant response to that might be two sides, two things. The first one is what you said. We may not want to stir the pot, right? We might not. There's that vague, like, oh, I've heard this thing, it's secondhand knowledge. I don't want to kind of stir the pot, but I'm totally willing to stir the pot because I'm vague booking, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Vague setting.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think there's also the other side of that coin of, you know, you don't want the community to blackball somebody if you're not sure, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't want to be the person who maybe was the person who caused that downfall, or even the complete opposite side of that. You know, maybe I don't know. So
yeah. So my feeling is I try to be very specific about what I know and don't know whenever somebody asks me. So even if my knowledge of that situation is secondhand or not that great, I might tell somebody what I know from my experience is XYZ, watching a person or just talking with them. This is my personal experience, but I have no idea in this area. I can point you to people to talk to if you want to know somebody else's firsthand account, because I really can't stand the secondhand gossip, because it's not productive and you never quite know what's happened. You don't
ever get both sides of that story either.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think we have a tendency to always like agree with the side that naturally we fall on, right? So if you're going to agree with your friend more than you're going to agree with their ex-boyfriend or their ex-girlfriend, typically. I mean, that's just the way that we work as humans. So
I don't agree with you most of the time.
Well, for sure. But you know, but you do. People take sides, right? It's just a natural thing. You are more likely to believe one side or the other. And I think it gets dangerous because you stop seeing both sides of the argument.
Exactly.
And you never know what somebody's motivations are. So somebody could completely violate somebody's consent, right? But you don't know the intricacies or the nuance of what led up to a situation. And that's not excusing anybody for violating consent, but they may or may not have known that they violated consent. It's far more complicated than a lot of people want to believe with a lot of situations. Some things are very black and white. Sometimes people like do douchey asshole things. But sometimes people.
And I know I've had.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I know I've had a case as a top where I once had an extremely over-negotiated scene where I got a 10-page list of detailed things to do and not do with someone I had never played with before. And of course, when you have something that long and detailed, I forgot one little thing on that list, which was sort of a grayish line. And then all of a sudden I'm like, holy crap, did I just, violate someone's consent accidentally? Because things were over-engineered, which it was a very tiny minor thing. But, is somebody then going to go tell everyone I'm not safe to play with or not, a good top, even though it was something that wasn't dangerous and very small and minute and the person didn't even care. How do you deal with that?
How's everyone looking at me? Well, I was just thinking, there was a really good writing, I think, by The Ferret or something. I only saw it today. I don't know when it came out. Which part of this do I even want to talk about here? So there is a lot of nuance, and everyone wants to look at things as black and white. But I think something we need to realize is everyone makes mistakes sometimes. And the important thing is to talk about it. If you realize that it's happened, if you can, obviously there's some times where something's really, really, I don't want to say traumatizing, but you're not ready to talk about it for a while. But I do think that it's important to try, or at least try and clarify things. And
I think it's important too that people be able to admit their mistakes without being crucified for them, because there are people that make honest, and there are people that make honest mistakes. And I've been in situations where, I've made an honest mistake. Somebody has made an honest mistake. And that's okay with me as long as they're willing to acknowledge it. And where it gets to the point where I think it's dangerous is where the top or bottom, whichever, doesn't respect the other person.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately, I think, the issue is not whether we are absolutely perfect 100% of the time, but if you realize you did something wrong, are you sincerely sorry for it? Are you going to try to make amends for it? Are you going to try to not do that again? Or do you just not care?
Yeah, and it's very easy in our community, our small community. I mean, it really is a small community.
Mm-hmm. Subculture of a subculture.
It's very easy to make a snap comment to a friend or somebody at a club after a scene that gets spread around that, maybe you should have talked to the person first.
Right.
And so it's very easy to, I don't know if blackball is the right way, but it really is easy to once that label is there as consent violator, it is far harder to remove it.
True.
Right?
I guess
found it or not.
I think I'm agreeing with Diana on the, because you mentioned blackballed first, Catherine, and it seems like with that's a really part of the reason it keeps people quiet is because they don't be responsible for blackballing. But if talking about it was not automatically going to label them that or blackball them, maybe people would be more willing to do that. I know of several situations where the vagueness and the people not trying not to cause trouble ended up where, people who were, perhaps needed to have more education and consent, I'll put it that way, were being led into places where they probably shouldn't.
I think it can absolutely fester. Like if you're constantly doing the vague discussion throughout the community, it might sometimes be better to just come out and say look, this is something that happened and we need to talk about this, rather than that constant vague, oh, well, I don't know anything, but
rip the Band-Aid maybe off.
Yeah.
So when that constantly happens, then people start thinking maybe there's a lot more nefariousness going on here than really is.
Yeah.
Sometimes something that's as simple as a misunderstanding. So, and I think that's what we're talking about here, not necessarily the malicious. Outward malicious rape type deal.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I can tell you, working with Consent Rocks at several events, this whole idea that a consent incident consists of a perpetrator and a victim, and we're going to find out what really happened and bring the person to justice. And it's just, that's not what happens. I mean, there are times when you don't have, you have two victims, or you have two perpetrators, or you have no perpetrator or victim. You have somebody who witnessed something. It's much more convoluted than that.
You have somebody who says, don't, a lot of times it's somebody who says don't touch here or do this, and you do it, and you don't, in the moment, it's
Yeah, for me, one example is some of us have weird triggers or weird things we don't like to have happen to us, and that are really obscure and things you might not think about. So for me, I love impact, but I really hate being hit on my thighs. And so I people forget that, especially if you're doing rough body play or, things where you're just smacking people around. It's really easy to get caught up and forget. So whenever that would happen to me as a bottom, I would just say thighs, and then they would move on, and then I'm done with it. I don't, it crossed the line we negotiated, but the person forgot. It wasn't, a matter of I'm maliciously going to pin you down and torture your thighs because you told me that that's a horrible thing, So that, I mean, some people feel very differently. Other people might react and say, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. And then make the person seem like this really evil, nefarious person.
It's interesting. Go ahead.
There was also an interesting point in this writing I was referring to. I wish I remember what it was called, because I know the ferret has written a million things. But there was this thought, if we kind of take out the stigma of, being human and screwing up sometimes, you will also find there are some people who do screw up frequently.
Yes.
And it might not even be on purpose, but it's also something to know about before you play with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a valid discussion. Yeah, but that's informed consent. If you're going to play with somebody, you ask people who they've played with before. and you know, it's important to be honest when somebody asks you, like if somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, I kind of want to play with Diana," you know, but I heard she's kind of crazy. I'll be like, "Oh yeah, she's a fucking nut." And
you must be this tall to go on this ride.
I'm not gonna be vague with them. I'm not gonna be like, well, you know, she's kind of dark and mysterious and like she'll
yes, I am very mysterious.
She'll you know, it's interesting. I think we hold. It's kind of interesting how consent is really important and negotiating is really important. I think the way we do it in kink is very bizarre when you take other types of relationships.
Oh yeah, totally.
Like, I mean, they're the same thing. We're all in relationships, whether they're sexual or sensual relationships or whatever. That there's still, but there's no other relationships I can think of that you negotiate the same way as we do in kink.
Yeah, and I think I like that particularly.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not trying to imply that it's a bad thing. It's just unique to the kink world.
And it can be very jarring when you go to other communities and discover that they don't necessarily do it the same way.
Oh yeah.
Like you go to a swinging party.
Go to a swinging party.
Or a gay leather bar.
Negotiation is very different. You know, it is like sometimes it's implied that if you're in a room, you've consented. Mm-hmm. You know, it's there are kink spaces that do that, right? So it's and you know, I've also had discussions with people who's like, do you consent in a club to watch me do a vomit scene with another person? Like, are you consenting? Am I triggering you for that? Or should I not do the scene at the club because it's going to bother you? You know, so there's varying degrees of this, and you know, what is triggering to who, and where is consent, and who are you supposed to negotiate what with, and how, and it's touchy.
And then you go on a vanilla date, and you really wonder if you could just lean in for this without having a 30-page contract outlining how much lip versus tongue you can use, and if you need a breath mint.
This is why
I need that.
Because I need that. Yes.
I need that. Kissing is like kind of the soft limit, I guess.
Yeah.
Ish, depending. So,
but I need explicit I need explicit permission to kiss somebody, and usually it will be them telling me. Actually, usually it'll be them getting bored because I won't do it unless they say it, because it's just got this ingrained, like, you have to negotiate every little thing that you're going to do.
Oh, yeah, and it ruins watching TV too. I mean, the Flash series is just like consent violation after consent violation, and you're just like, why are you? You're not a hero. You're a jerk.
I mean, if you look at the parallels, though, if you're on a hot date with somebody and it's your first date and it's going really good, and then you end up back at their apartment and then you have sex on their floor or bathtub or closet or wherever you end up, you know, if you did that during a scene, like, in all seriousness, and you didn't negotiate any of it, are you a consent violator? And you're doing the same thing. It's just a different context, right?
Yeah, I think that's where you're estimating the risk. You know, if you do that, you are taking the risk that you are violating consent with all of the accompanying things that could happen.
Yeah, but I think in the kink world, that is heightened. I think it's heightened. I think people really, that's totally unacceptable in our world. If I've had hot scenes that have been negotiated as like sensual, that I've gotten freaking sexual hot, and I've stopped and I've drawn back that, because it's like, we did not negotiate this. We both want it. We both really want this to happen right now, but it's not going to happen.
And I had one where we explicitly negotiated before we started the scene that we, at the beginning of the scene, did not specifically intend to have sex, but we both said we were willing to change our minds after, like change our minds during the scene. And it was explicitly negotiated that was allowed as opposed to doing it. So,
but then you have to at the beginning of the scene, like, assume that that's an opportunity, right? Or an option. Right.
Exactly. I can imagine a case where I'd want to do this, but I'm not there right now. So I will leave the option open with the understanding that it may not happen at all. It is, so like you say, it's complicated.
It's like, we're going to go out on our first date, but there may be strawberry gelato that happens but it could possibly be.
What if they're out of strawberry gelato?
I'm just saying, it just
sex.
comes down to that. At what point, I'm trying to draw parallels between different types of situations. But I think it's important that those type of negotiations happen. Mm-hmm. But it's just interesting how it's very different in the kink world and just generally anywhere. And I think a lot of people lose that nuance, that difference, and are quick to judge things that are just simple misunderstandings or whatever.
Yeah, it's easier to call somebody out than examine the nuance of the situation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We want things to be simple and uncomplicated. Like tea.
I mean, just look at politics. Let's not look at politics. But.
No. Okay, let's do some actual real live simple questions. I'd like to. I'm not sure how to do this. I can either have the first person who responds, or we can do all three of you. But it's the lightning questions I do at the end of the Ropecast, which is I'm just going to have simple things. First thing that comes to your mind, and we'll just have whoever. If you want to answer it, answer it. If you don't want to answer it, say pass. So first question, what is your favorite food?
Favorite food, chicken makni.
Chicken what?
Chicken makni.
I don't know.
It's like butter chicken. It's Indian food.
Oh, okay.
That's probably the same.
Yeah, actually.
Wow,
yeah.
really? That's weird. Oh, I mean, I don't know. Penang curry? I don't know.
All right. How about your beverage of choice?
Ooh, alcoholic or non-alcoholic?
Beverage of choice. I can say, pick either one.
Coffee.
I'm a Coke drinker.
I like Arnold Palmer's.
Okay. If what's a good book you'd recommend?
Ooh.
Wool by Hugh Hawley.
Yes. Oh, especially now. Oh.
Fantastic book. Fantastic series.
I had the audiobook.
Oh,
it's amazing on audio.
Can I give two?
Sure.
Can I give The Art of Racing in the Rain, But You Will Cry.
Okay. Art of Racing in the Rain.
The Art of Racing.
Wow, I can't. I'm really bad at on-the-spot questions like this.
What about the one that you just read? You told me to read.
Yeah, I know. That one can cause a stir. There's one I read called Science Left Behind, which analyzes some pseudoscience that goes on in politics that I feel fairly strongly about, but particularly from the progressive left, which is weird for me because I am a liberal. But I think it's good to self-critique any belief that you have. So I think that's an amazing book.
I'm guessing something that not everyone has read at this point, because I think disappointed by most of the books I've been reading lately. Like the last one I remember thinking this was really good was like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo or something.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's fine. I mean, it's there's no right or wrong answer here. This is more of a getting to know you kind of thing. Somebody's going to be in your class, be like, oh my God, you like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and something like that. Or they show up with Coke, something like that. I'm doing you a favor here. You don't know. How about a good movie?
Ooh.
This is going to win me anyway.
What?
So you go first.
Oh, okay. Well, a recent one we just saw was called The Handmaiden. The Handmaiden, which is a Japanese.
It's Korean.
Oh, it is Korean. It is Korean. That's right. Korean film. Amazing movie that we just saw. Both erotic and really just a flat out good movie.
Yeah, that's on Netflix, right? Or is it Amazon? One of the two.
Amazon. Yeah. Let's see.
Hands down, my favorite movie, this is kind of sad, is The Sound of Music.
Oh, really?
With Julia.
I'm learning things. Also, I didn't know you guys had the same favorite food over that. I don't know. What have I've told you to watch some stuff that you liked. What?
I remember. Probably Yukimura porn.
That works.
Yeah.
It's mostly honestly been porn that you've told me to watch.
That is not true. I told you to watch Tampopo.
Yeah, Tampopo. Oh, that was
a good one.
That's a little different than Yukimura porn. Slightly.
It's just that's the same thing. But it's about food and culture surrounding food and stuff, and it's really cute and really funny.
It's funny. She made me go see it. It was funny.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. What is something that you have in your, you're getting ready to go out to the dungeon, and what's something that would be in the toy bag, either separately or all together, that people would be surprised to know is in there?
I think Kat should answer that.
Which day?
Because some days you'll have an ear of corn. Because that happened with Kat.
This might be better to have them answer this for me.
She had a cow tibia.
A cow tibia, and then I had a femur.
Yes.
Cow femur.
I have a 18-inch awl that I've used.
Okay.
Awl.
Oh, lefty,
which is an arm.
An anatomical arm that we use for teaching where nerves are. For TKs, but it's also a really good impact instrument. So you could spank somebody with this anatomical arm that has a very small hand.
Probably my favorite thing that I take with me regularly is a little spoon. Actually, it's a little metal spoon, like just that you would eat soup with or cereal.
Because it hurts worse, or what?
Oh, you have no idea.
Oh yeah,
what I do with the spoon.
My worst kink related injury has come from a spoon. So I fully attest to that.
Yeah.
The mind boggles.
My favorite moment in a scene was when somebody yelled out, "Is that the spoon?" during the scene. And I diabolically laughed, yes. So yeah, I have a little spoon that I keep in my toy bag.
Yeah, and then for a while there was the rubber eraser that was my regular go-to main thing, just like a long thing you find in a museum.
Yes.
Those things are horrible.
That is so mean.
So wonderful.
I can't remember if it was Lokai or Midori who showed me that first, but yeah, those things are nasty. Okay, so I have a magic wand. Here, I'm holding it up on the video. And I can wave this wand and make anyone, living, dead, past, future, fictional, real, show up in perfect health, and they want to play with you. And let's say they want to play with you as a group. Who, as a group, would you like me to have suddenly manifest that you can play with?
Jesus Christ.
Okay.
Wow.
I think that's a first.
The horrible, horrible things I would do. Makes me sound terrible. I don't know if I want you to do that or not.
I'm not lying.
That's my impulsive, honest.
When I was a kid, I had a crush on Jesus. I did. So this is okay.
I did too.
Yeah, this is fine.
Oh, this ain't a crush. This ain't a crush. You guys know me, but yeah, sorry if I offended.
No. Hey, it's
yeah. Although
all the people I won with The Sound of Music just left.
Nobody. So don't worry about it.
Although actually, if we're going in that vein, yeah, Satan. Yeah, that disappointed me.
We're watching the series Lucifer, and I like the comic book better, but it's kind of fun.
Yeah, I definitely had a satanic fetish growing up, in a very religious household.
That's why we're friends.
Nice. Okay, so the last question, and this is one for each of you, unless
I was Jesus.
Oh, you're agreeing with Jesus?
Yeah, I was going to say Dean said Jesus. Okay, that's pretty awesome that all three of you can agree on one. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The last question that each of you should answer is: what is your favorite dirty word?
Well, just because it annoys people so much,
I will smack you.
She says she'll smack me, but I really have to say it because everyone hates it. But I just love the word moist.
No.
Mainly because of the hatred it incites in everybody.
I literally just had my ears plugged, so I think I know what she said. But
we'll edit that out and we'll put in something more,
I don't
pudenda.
I don't really.
I don't like most of them. Like I hate most of the words for like vaginas. I don't even like the word vagina. Like I hate all of them.
Yeah,
I
none
mean,
of them work very well.
I think fuck might
Yeah,
be.
like fuck is my go-to.
That's
Yeah.
my go-to. I'm not a
It
dirty
doesn't
talker.
feel very dirty though. Like
Yeah.
it's just part of my vocabulary.
It's like, yeah. I'm not
So-
a dirty talker.
What about, okay, let's change this around a little bit then. Instead of saying your favorite dirty word, what is a word that you think is sexy?
Oh.
Spoon. No, I'm kidding.
Best answer ever. That is great.
Cat's new pickup line. She's just gonna walk up to somebody with a spoon
Yeah.
and say, "Spoon."
Maybe.
I want to spoon you, and I'm going to pull the spoon out.
That sounds like something that a frat boy would do at a bar. actually.
Yeah.
It does.
Oh gosh.
What is?
Frenulum. No.
What did you say? What was it?
Frenulum.
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 Frenulum. That is one of my favorite words too. That could be a
What-
dirty
what-
word.
Cunt, actually. Cunt may actually is a good word. That's a really good word.
Yeah.
Don't think you've won Tina over that.
It's very versatile.
That's true. It is. It transcends gender. You know, somebody could be a cunt. Cool. Well, obviously, I'm looking forward to seeing you all at Ropecraft. Thank you for traveling all the way from Chicago.
It's a hard journey, but we're willing to make it for such a great event.
We appreciate your sacrifice, and we'll look forward to.
We're really looking forward
We are.
Yeah.
to the event. We went to the one in New Orleans, and it was an amazing event. So we're looking forward to being part of it.
You were amazing in New Orleans too. So I'm really looking forward to having you back again. All right, great. Well, then we will bring the podcast to a close. If people want to get in touch with you, would you rather they go through my podcast to ask any questions, or can they contact you directly? And if so, where and how?
So we have a couple of ways. Of the three of us, I am very active on Twitter. It's just KATH_A_RIN. I don't know if you caught that, but it's just it's the same as my FET profile name, my personal FET profile name, which is attached to Bad Kitty Bondage. Diane is pretty responsive on the Bad Kitty Bondage FET like profile. She handles most of the communications through there.
There's an underscore in the Bad Kitty Bondage profile too, right? It's
Yes.
Yeah.
It's BadKitty_Bondage.
right. Okay.
We also have a website that we just have started putting stuff up on. But
tutorials.
we're slowly putting a lot of information up there. We do really want to, if there's one page on there that we think is valuable for people, it's the glossary, especially coming up on a con. There's a lot of information there, to terms people who may not be familiar with them that you hear at these cons and stuff.
Yeah, because I think that's the one thing I hear from people most is what is a kanuki? What is a nanome?
Yeah.
What is this? So
Kanuki, that's those Italian pastries with the cream inside, right?
But Twitter, honestly, I think would be the fastest way to get a response.
Cool. Well, I will have links to that in the show notes on all of those ways. So great. Thank you very much.
great.
All right.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
So I'd like to thank Bad Kitty Bondage for taking the time to do that interview with me. It was great seeing them all. One of the advantages of using Google Hangouts was I got to actually see their happy, smiling faces and talk with them. Someday, maybe I'll do video interviews here for the podcast. I'll see what I can find out about that. If that's something you think would be interesting, there's a couple of ways you can let me know. One is just to email me, greatanswer@gmail.com, or go on Twitter and find me as Great Answer, or FetLife. I'm Great Answer. I'm Great Answer pretty much everywhere, even Facebook, although I hate Facebook. Or you can tell me in person. Come to Ropecraft in Chicago Memorial Day weekend, 26th through 29th, and you can use the code Great Answer Guest, all one word, to get a much lower rate than our current price, which is, of course, for all the latecomers. But because you're a podcast listener and I love you, we are going to absolutely give you all the deals we can. Please make sure you let Twisted Monk know that you appreciate his support of the podcast at twistedmonk.com. And you too can support the podcast. That's the other way you can let me know about wanting to have the video thing, is you can help me out by supporting the podcast on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Great Answer. And other than that, I just want to thank Bad Kitty Bondage one last time. And I will continue to be here putting up podcasts, because when it comes to kink, sex, and culture, it's not all black and white, so you might as well dance in the gray.